This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Folks, if you've listened to the Heard Tell program, you've heard our friend Gabriella Hoffman, but you need to make sure you're checking out her podcast, District of Conservation. It's a podcast exploring the nuances of true conservation efforts from DC and beyond. From topic discussions to exclusive interviews with conservation and energy newsmakers, Gabriella keeps listeners appraised of the latest news stories while elevating important voices. Listen to District of Conservation on Apple Podcasts or wherever podcasts are played.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, here's the thing. Everybody talks about something like CPAC. We're going to talk to somebody that was actually there. Turn down the noise on it, find what was actually going on. National narratives sometimes don't always give the picture, so let's talk to somebody that was actually there. Our friend Chris Slack is with us. He was there on the ground. He's a graduate of the University of Texas, but for the purposes of this discussion, we will not hold that against him. He's also an intern fellow at US Today. How you doing, my friend? Thank you for the time.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate your time. Okay, let's start big picture here. For folks, in case they don't know, what is CPAC? Because this used to be the once-a-year gathering of the American Conservative Union. It was a thing, really big deal. This is kind of a different beast now because it's turned into a little bit of a roadshow. They're taking it around the world. They're taking it around. They've been to Hungary. They've been to parts in the U.S. This was the Dallas one or the Texas one. I saw it promoted as both. Just talk about how this is a little you may have thought of as CPAC traditionally.
Yeah, so CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Committee, and traditionally in the past, they'd have distinguished speakers like George Will and Mitch Daniels, and it'd be an annual thing. And recently, it doesn't seem anything like what it used to be. If you just watched YouTube videos of CPAC in the past, it's nothing like it is today. Today, it's like you said, a roadshow. It's all around the world. It was in Israel, and there's a lot of like circus-like antics that, in my perspective, a little disappointing. I would like to experience the CPAC of the past.
Yeah, and you wrote in USA Today a piece inside CPAC. Let's start there. You're a Texas guy anyway. This was in Texas. When you went, what was the environment on the ground there? I know, see, the big things get headlines. Trump gives a speech. Orban gives a speech. We'll get into the crazy theatrical stuff that trended on social media. But mostly these are just regular people showing up for the show of it. When you're just walking through the halls, the vendor tables, these things, what's the atmosphere? What's the kind of people you're running into?
The people that I'm running into are very Trumpy. They're usually all decked out in either Trump stuff or conservative stuff. On the first day, there wasn't that much Trump stuff, but on the third day, it was just all Trump stuff because that's when he was speaking. The people very supportive of him. There was some silly moments like people saying "hoorah" like they were in the military or something. There's a lot of silliness, but it was mostly a very, very, very MAGA.
When you're talking to these folks, you talk about them being decked out. What's your feel when you're actually in the room, though? Is it group believers? Is it people that are like a spectator sport? You go to the show, you wear the team jersey. Is there a ratio between those two things? How did it feel when you're actually in the room with these folks?
It seemed to me like the majority were true believers. Based on the reactions in the crowds. A lot of them cheered to everything a typical Trump supporter would cheer to. A lot of cheering for 2,000 Mules whenever that was mentioned in a positive light. And same thing for anti-vax kind of talk when people were speaking. So I think a lot of them were actual true believers. There were like instances of like guys in yarmulkes with Trump's face on it. There was one guy with Trump's face on his shirt, and under it there was white bold text that said "sexiest man alive." So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it seemed to me like a lot of people were actual true believers, not just putting on a jersey.
When you're doing this, I know the silly folks start to trend really, really fast. You dealt with some of you're tweeting some of them out on your social media. What's the really ones that kind of got your attention? Because you get the folks in the convention hall that are, let's just call it what it is, they're kind of getting their attention, that sort of thing. What's a couple of those, because you tweeted some of them out, but what's the ones that kind of really jumped out at you, a few of them?
Yeah, so one of them that I did tweet out was Brandon Straka. He's the founder of #WalkAway, which is about former Democrats walking away from the Democrat Party. He's a really Trumpy kind of guy, and he was at the Capitol on January 6th, and he got arrested for a litany of things at the Capitol. And so he put on this performance art where they had like an actual cage next to the walkaway booth. And he had an orange jumpsuit and a MAGA hat on. And he sat in a chair in the cage and pretended to cry for like hours. Like, I was actually a little impressed by how long he was able to pretend to cry. And every once in a while he would get up from his chair and write on the chalkboard, where's everybody? And, he'd count the days on the chalkboard too. And so I was getting pictures of that and all. And then all of a sudden, these huge security guys come over and, they push everyone away. And, next thing I know, Marjorie Taylor Greene is like right in front of me. And then she goes inside the cage with Brandon and like gets on her knees and like pretends to wipe away his pretend tears. And like pretends to console him, and then some random guy in front of the cage just extends his arms and pretends to, I guess, be in solidarity with them. And so he just starts saying the Lord's Prayer, and everyone starts doing it with him. And people were saying Marjorie Taylor Greene went in there to pray with Brandon, but no, some random dude just started praying out loud, and everyone just joined along. So it just kind of reached peak absurdity at that point. So I just took a picture of that and posted on Twitter, and it went pretty viral.
Marjorie Taylor Greene part, and then a few people had picked up on the Straka part. But you're saying this went on for hours?
Oh yeah, he was crying for hours until he had to speak, and that speech was really aggressive. So it didn't seem like it went as planned. He was on a panel with this guy, Representative Brian Babin. He's a representative for Texas Congressional 36 District. And he was talking about how no congressman called him at all when he was sitting in a jail cell, which he never did. He never sat in a jail cell. So he lied about that. He actually got out of jail time because he was cooperating with the feds and ratting out all of his buddies at January 6th. So he was complaining. He was, acting like he was a victim. He was, getting really upset. And he was basically turning the crowd against Brian Babin, just this one congressman, and saying, why didn't you do anything? And Babin was, a little shaken. His voice was shaky, and people were just like from the crowd heckling him and saying, why didn't you do anything? Well, what's wrong with you? And like, it got really bad. And it was after that moment that everyone showed up at the walkaway booth, and the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing happened. And it just, like I said, reached peak absurdity at that point.
Because we only get to see the glimpses, and you're there. Did the Marjorie Taylor Greene, was that planned or spontaneous? What is your feel on, especially with the context you just gave with the speech? Was that planned? That had to be planned then, right?
It had to be planned because she was talking about no congressman calling her and all that. I mean, calling him and all that. And so I assume Marjorie Taylor Greene got word of that, or she was listening to the speech And so she, in an act of performance, showed up and pretended to console him. But, since he was, going so hard at Brian Babin for not contacting him, I was actually surprised that he let her, play along in his performance art, because she never called him either, right? So like, I was surprised, like, why is he playing along with her? Why isn't he like calling her out for, not calling him while she was in the cage?
Yeah, there was definitely some emails exchanged or text messages, and that got planned out. Let's be adults here. Obviously, though, if he's going after a sitting congressman, they're all up for election, so somebody's somewhere in there. On Twitter, it was fun watching it because, of course, I'm of a different group, so I was watching it on Twitter unfold, and they were all immediately like, "Wait a minute, he's the guy that ratted everybody else out, and that's why he's not in prison." But did people there in the room not put those two together? They got Google on their phone, right? They could Google who this guy is while they're standing there. Did you see any hint of that, or was it just go along with the show?
No, everyone was very supportive of him. Everyone believed every word he said. And this guy was definitely swindling everyone, but everyone was like pretending. Like, there were people, I'm not sure if they were actually crying, but there were people who were like actually crying, like seeing him like pretend to cry. And they also gave out like silent disco headsets to hear what Brandon was saying, but also there was like multiple channels. And one channel, you get to hear what the stories of other January 6th prisoners had. And people seemed very upset about what was going on. And there were a lot of reporters around the cage, and one of them had a mask on, and so people started to target her. She was a reporter from Vice, and one person was really loud and really vocal, saying, she's from Vice, she's going to slander him, just really defensive of Brandon Straka. And people like started to like crowd around her, and she had before it got like bad, that's when Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up. And so the focus was now on Marjorie Taylor Greene, not on this, Vice reporter who's just taking pictures and trying to do her job.
Did you see a lot of other instances with that? Because CPAC's a big event, although this isn't as big as the national one, but Trump was there, so obviously it was a heightened event. Did you see a lot of regular mainstream press, for lack of a better term? Were they there? Were they kind of a low-key presence? Was there other incidences like that?
To me, it seemed like most of the mainstream press showed up on the third day when Trump was speaking. But regarding like just walking around, there were maybe just a few reporters doing that. I know Vice is known for going to right-wing events and like reporting on, quote unquote extremism. But that's like just a Vice thing. So I didn't really get to see the credentials of everyone else. But I talked to her, and she said that she was being targeted all day because of her mask. Like, she was the only one with the mask. There was more people with masks on in the media than in the whole audience, so people could easily tell like she's not on our side.
Yeah.
That's the sound of your current hype level at the gas pump. But brace yourself for something fuel-nominal, because Unleaded 88 is about to take the hype to a whole new level. Unleaded 88 is cheaper, cleaner, and greener than regular unleaded. Plus, it's homegrown, making Unleaded 88 the clear choice at the pump and totally worth the hype. So pump it up with Unleaded 88, brought to you by Iowa Corn.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
see it. Chris Schlock joining us. He was at CPAC. Something else you brought up in your experience there and writing about it, you talk about the conspiracy theories. How prevalent was it? Because it's easy for the outside mainstream press and the national narrative to be like, oh, it's just a conspiracy fest. How much of a theme was it? How constant was it, the conspiracy theories? Not just the election, but some of the other stuff. Now, again, timeline-wise, remember, this is a week ago, so this is before Trump and the search warrant and all that. We're targets, we're victims, Trump's innocent, all of that kind of stuff. How prevalent really was it?
You know, I wish that the mainstream media was wrong about this, but there were a ton of conspiracy theorist stuff and booths. When you walk in, the first one you see is Real America's Voice News, and they're known, and they were like presenting like Steve Bannon's War Room show, and that guy is known for all kinds of fringe ideas and conspiracy theories. And there were, Mike Lindell was there, but he's more of just a election was stolen kind of conspiracy theorist. But then there was like Jack Posobiec, the Pizzagate conspiracy theorist kind of guy. I mean, he basically hops on any trendy conspiracy theory. There was one booth called Grid Down, Power Up, which is a conspiracy theory about the electric grid being controlled by elites and going to be shut down, and some sort of sinister motive there. But yeah, there were a lot of conspiracy booths and politicians who embraced conspiracy theories, like Sid Miller. And there was also the Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. Peter McCulloch, who believe that the vaccine has a sinister motive to it. And I mean, a lot of it was, sort of what's already mainstream in the GOP, like the anti-vax stuff and the election was stolen stuff. But there was also some other fringe conspiracy theories that the GOP hasn't, wholly embraced yet.
Talking about these things, because human nature is what it is, but we don't want to always pigeonhole everybody. I'm sure there's a spectrum involved here.
Oh yeah.
How much of it do you think is ignorance, and how much of it do you think is actually out and out maliciousness? Because those are two different things, to be fair to folks. I imagine there's a portion of people that just get swept up in this stuff, and then there's the people like you talk about Posebic and these guys who peddle in this because it's their business model. Give me a ratio or a feeling. How much of it is, do you think, people going along with the crowd, and then people where it gets really malicious and dark, like threatening reporters, like that kind of stuff?
I think it's more ignorance. I don't think it's that much. I think it's usually a tiny percentage of people that are actually malicious. It seemed like a lot of ignorance, but I mean, yeah, there were definitely true believers of these things. Some shirts like Alex Jones was right, Infowars shirts, and well, there was like some Proud Boys there, and like some Enrique Tarrio supporters there, and he's one of the founders of Proud Boys. So there were the fringe was not shy, I'd say at CPAC, but I don't think that's the majority of people there.
Now, we know CPAC shoes off some of the really, really vile folks, the Nick people, kind of, who keeps trying to show up. Nick Fuentes, we're talking about, who keeps trying to show up at these things. They did manage to kind of get rid of him and shoo him off.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, because he's so extreme that everybody's kind of sure, where is the line? Because they don't seem to be doing a whole lot of policing their own on this stuff, do they?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew what the line was. I will say that there was this one like white nationalist group that CPAC did not approve of, that showed up during a time that I was not there. I think it was during the Cattleman's Ball. I don't really know who showed up also, but there was like Facebook messages and all that, like come to our booth. So I do think that CPAC is good at policing stuff that's like racist, like Nick Fuentes, white nationalist types. But when it comes to conspiracy theories, I don't think they're as strict.
Chris Schlock joining us on Herd Tell. We're going to take a quick break when we come back. A lot of big names. That's what usually gets covered. We're going to talk to him about those big names, what their reactions were in the hall, talk about the attendance, which got a lot of coverage before Trump got there. And then, of course, the main event itself, Donald Trump spoke. More about CPAC with our friend Chris Schlock right after this on Herd Tell. Welcome back to Herd Tell. We're continuing to talk to our friend Chris Schlock. He was at CPAC down in Dallas. Which was it officially? Because I've seen CPAC Dallas, CPAC Texas. What does the actual branding on the wall say down there?
It's CPAC Dallas.
CPAC Dallas. You heard the same thing there. Everybody just called it CPAC Texas, but that's what Texas folks do. They try to take over everything. You're a Texas Longhorn. You know how this goes. That's a little. I'm kidding. I'm a West Virginia guy. We've had our moments the last few years, my friend. All right. The big names are always the headliners on this. That's how they advertise the event. Let's talk about a few of them. You were there for this one. Name that's getting more, I think he gets more attention in the press, the mainstream press, than he probably does in conservative or on conservative media. Rick Scott. Of course, he's powerful. He's a senator. He's in charge of the Senate committees for funding things. He got in a little bit of trouble earlier this year with his plan that wasn't really a plan. Has presidential ambitions, allegedly. What was his reaction there? Because he seems like one of those guys that's really having a hard time bridging the gap between what he wants to be and what he thinks he has to be to the base of the party, a.k.a. folks at CPAC.
Yeah, so there wasn't like that much clapping and cheering when he came out, but based on what he said, a lot of people were really supportive. He talked about the militant left being the newest threat. You know, in the past it was communism and World War II, World War I. But he said, you know, the militant left, the people on our own soil is the newest threat. And so there's a lot of militaristic kind of language that people really seem to love. There's other instances of guys being speaking like that. Mark Robinson was another one, talking about just like being a soldier and dying on the hill and all that, and just a lot of over the top kind of military language. Yeah, people seem to really gravitate toward that.
It's kind of weird coming from him, who ought to know better. He referenced the War of 1812. He referenced the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. It wasn't like an offhanded reference. This was kind of a theme for him, trying to tie the two together, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We'll leave that one alone. Name that gets a lot of attention. The MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. He was all over the place on social media on this, but in the halls, in the convention center. Not quite the reception some folks might think he's getting. What was his reaction by the people at CPAC?
People really liked him. He was all over the place. He was at all kinds of booths doing interviews. People just loved to see him. Yeah, he had a really popular speech as well. People liked what he was saying. I don't remember exactly what he said, so it wasn't that memorable to me. But yeah, people seem to be really supportive of Mike.
Name that gets more attention overseas than here, but he's gotten a lot of play in conservative and especially right-wing Trump media. Nigel Farage, of course, he was, involved in Brexit and that sort of thing, but he's making a pretty good living over here on the speaking circuit. Mm-hmm. What was the reaction to him?
Just like Orban, it seemed like this guy who wasn't American, it seemed like people didn't really know him that well. But everything he said, people loved. He talked about Trump being a great president. He talked about fake news, right? He hit on every right-wing talking point that got people riled up. So yeah, people seem to like him.
An interesting point in his speech, and you mentioned it on your coverage when you were live tweeting about this. He came out real strong for Carrie Lake. That seems like a weird marriage. Like, does he really know who Carrie Lake is other than maybe meeting her? Is there like that? That seemed kind of strange that those two would go together, yet there he was promoting her pretty heavily. People cheered it, of course, because they love her as well. That kind of seemed odd to me. Did it strike you as odd?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot, but the whole event was like a Kerry Lake and Trump love fest. I'd say like almost half the speakers mentioned her name, and they always got a good cheer out of it. So maybe he was just saying, what other speakers were saying, because I mean, people really loved her. And I think on the first day, the results still weren't decided, and so there was definitely some worry over that. But I think on the second day it was decided, and so people were really really happy.
It's odd though, because Carrie Lake, of course, she's running for governor of Arizona. What you're talking about is the GOP nomination was pretty close. They had to, and of course, it's a Western state, so it took a little while with the time difference. So it took about an extra day and a half before we got a conclusive result there. She's now the nominee for the GOP. Kind of weird for a state governor that's nominee to be the headliner for a CPAC, but like you just mentioned, maybe it was just because of the circumstances. And again, this is in Texas, not in Arizona. If it was in Arizona, it makes sense. Why do you think there was so much focus on that? I've got to think it's because the people who think the election are stolen, they are very focused on Arizona. Is that the main part of that, or is there something else involved in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I also think it's kind of like she's going up against the mainstream media. She used to work with the media. Now she's against it, calling it the enemy of the people. And she's seen as this as this victim, and she's like this, she's this strong hero that's defeated the mainstream media, who's against her and defeated her opponent. So I think there's this like hero complex to her, kind of like Trump.
Couple other ones. Glenn Beck's an interesting one over the Trump years because he was against Trump, campaigned against Trump. There's a famous video from Vegas where he was actually in the room and Trump walked in and pretty much, for lack of a pun, trumped him from speaking and shut him down. Then he did the apology tour. Now he's back full blown on Team Trump. What was his reaction to folks?
Oh, people loved him. People loved Glenn Beck. They loved everything he said. He was saying like, don't ever read mainstream news. Don't read a single thing from it. People just loved him. He said a lot of Trumpy things, and I mean, people didn't heckle him. Like there were some speakers that got heckled. He was not one of them.
So forgiven, I guess, by the base.
Yeah.
All right, you mentioned it. Who got heckled? Who did get heckled? Who was kind of those people that didn't either hit the right note or folks just weren't having any of?
So the first speaker event I went to was one with Greg Abbott. He's the governor of my state, and there was a kind of a vicious primary, and people were really supportive of the really hard MAGA base was really supportive of Don Huffines, and so some people were calling Abbott a rhino and not conservative enough, but I'd say most of the crowd was really supportive of Abbott, and the people who did heckle, like they got like nasty looks from people, and one of them actually brought security to go take one of them out of the event. So there was a lot of support for Abbott, but some heckling for not being conservative enough. He didn't end the lockdowns as quickly as, okay, well, yeah, I think that's what he got heckled for, because it's Texas, it's known to be really conservative, and yet he did lockdowns and mask mandates. So people, that's usually that's what people attack him for usually.
Yeah. So Abbott was one of those, and it was a theme other than when Trump was there, because of course he's the big ticket headliner. There's a lot of talk of attendance, and one of the ones they talked about was Abbott's speech, that there was plenty of good seats still available, as Bob Euchre used to say. What was the attendance like? Because he was one of those that kind of got some viral attention on social media of like, hey, there's not a lot of attendance here. Talk about the attendance situation.
Yeah, so for the first couple days, I'd say about half the seats were filled. But on the third day, all the seats were filled. It seemed like really Trumpy event, because there really wasn't that many people excited to see all the other speakers as much as they wanted to see Trump. And there was like a lot of a lot of cheering and clapping for like Marjorie Taylor Greene when she spoke and Matt Gaetz when he spoke, more so than like any of the other speakers. But Trump definitely was the one speaker that people wanted to see at that event.
Yeah, and we'll get to Trump in just a second. Okay, the name that got the most mainstream media coverage by far outside of Trump himself, maybe more than in a lot of ways, because we kind of know what a Trump speech at this point is going to be. Viktor Orban, he's the prime minister of Hungary, like you mentioned earlier. They just did a CPAC in Hungary a couple of months ago. So there's obviously a working relationship there. Do people really know who this guy is? I know he stood up. I know he hit all the talking points. He gets the applause lines. He says things that sound conservative to the American conservative ear. Do they really know who he is and what he's about, though? Or was it just, oh, it's this foreign guy that says stuff we like?
Yeah, so I'm more on the side of people didn't really know who he was. But some guy that was working for CPAC thought because there was like some like dead silence in between the clapping that maybe some people were conflicted and knew a bit of him, but liked what he was saying. I think majority of people didn't know him, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like you said, he hit all the conservative talking points. One lady next to me was saying, "Oh my goodness, he's amazing." He was telling conservatives to curb illegal immigration, and he talked about winning the culture war. He talked about Hungary's low flat tax rate. He said Hungary actually built their wall. He called mainstream media fake news. Said winning's become our daily habit. He talked about Christian and family values, criticized George Soros, praised law enforcement, and talked about law and order. So this guy, really knew what to say. He seemed to understand our movement a little too well. Yeah, but people, gave him a standing ovation. They loved everything he said. So it's a little disturbing, how well he knows the movement and how ignorant people are of him. And same thing with like Brandon Straka. Like people loved everything he said, but didn't actually do any research into saying this guy's actually fake. Like he's not anything like that he says he is.
See, I don't want to be Pollyannish here because we've been doing this a while. We're all grown folks. We know how this works. This is a preaching to the choir event. People are going to hear what they want to hear. That's why they're going to this. However, in the age we live in now, kids in schools and people at their churches, if something gets said screwy by a teacher or a preacher at your church, the first thing everybody does is jerk out their phone and Google it. That's a thing now in culture. Everybody's doing it. Schools are having to pass rules about it. Colleges are. It's a thing among churches. I was just talking to some friends of the Christian persuasion. They're like, oh, no, this is a thing. You got to be careful preaching because people are fact checking you in real time. Why isn't anybody Googling Brandon Straka when he's in a cage for 4 or 5 hours? Why? I understand the answer to this, but you tell me your perspective on it. That just blows my mind. It's like, oh, this guy's speaking. Maybe I should Google him real fast and learn something about him. Did you see any of that?
I didn't see any of it. I think it's because people wanted to believe what he was saying. But I also think it's because like 90% of the audience were like really old. I think if I could take a guess, the median age was probably around 65, maybe older. There were a lot of elderly folks there. You look in the crowd and you see a lot of gray hair. So I don't think old people are as technologically capable as young people. So that could be a good reason why.
Makes sense. Chris Schlock joining us. We're going to take one more quick break. When we come back, the main event of these things, Donald J. Trump gets in the building. We'll also talk about one of those other factors that we've been kicking around on some of our messaging stuff, why CPAC might be trending older and older. Doesn't have anything to do with the politics either. Finish up with CPAC, our friend Chris Schlock, right after this on Heard Tell. Welcome back to Heard Tell. Oh, we've been talking about CPAC, not from narratives, not from conjecture, somebody that's actually there in the room. It's how we like to do things here on Heard Tell. Chris Schlock's joining us, one of our great Young Voices contributors. He's also an intern at USA Today. He's got some good writing, including a piece out on this. Look for that. We're going to link to it in the show notes. Make sure you read it for yourself. Okay, we just talked about the attendance. It was interesting because we do the Young Voices stuff, and I'm also doing the mentoring stuff. So we have, discussion groups where we talk about things. I found it really interesting. One thing that got brought up by people why they don't attend CPAC is they talk about how expensive it's gotten. And especially, and I think part of it is it used to be a once a year thing. So people are like, okay, we save up, or a lot of groups will fundraise to go to CPAC. A lot of youth and college, they'd fundraise and go to CPAC. That'd be the 1 year thing. I think with them doing it more and more often, it's just getting expensive and people aren't doing it. You talked about the age demographic. Well, that's the age that's got disposable income and time on their hands. Is that part of what's changing the demographic, not just the politics and ideology, but maybe they're overextending this brand just a little bit too much? Is that a thing?
I think that's a good possibility. The ticket was, I'd say, almost $300, but the student ticket was $50. So there still is an incentive for students to go. But anyone that isn't a student and is in between the age of like say 20 and I don't know 60, like those, that's not really the age group that I saw there. And that would make sense. Those people aren't students. They don't have a lot of disposable income like old people do. Yeah, I mean you could say price is a reason, and the ticket did not include the hotel, so you had to pay for that too. And it was at the Hilton and Anatole Hotel, which is a really old hotel, but it's also expensive as well. So, I mean, that could be a good reason. But I also think another reason is TPUSA has been having these student action summits, and it's just all young people. I was talking to some students at CPAC, and they say, yeah, I've mostly only gone to TPUSA. It's like all kids, don't see any old people there. So I think TPUSA has been, suctioning away those, kids and students from CPAC, and, old people have just been taking over CPAC. So
interesting demographic to keep an eye on going forward. Okay. Main event, Trump shows up. Before that, they did the straw poll. He won by 69%. Don't tell me that didn't get gimmicks, but we'll leave that alone for another time. He wins the straw poll handily. DeSantis is a distant third at like 28-30%. We know the reaction is going to be big. Look, his speeches now are pretty much the greatest hits package. We don't even have to cover. We know what he's going to say to these things. Is the enthusiasm in the room still there for this? Were they still hanging on every word? Were they hitting all the applause lines?
Oh, absolutely. Every single word. I will say, because his speech seemed a little longer than usual. Speeches are usually a little bit over an hour, like an hour and 10 minutes. This one went on for like an hour and 45 minutes. So I could tell there's a little bit of people were getting a little tired. A few people left the room probably to leave early, because there's a lot of, there'd be a lot of traffic. But yeah, I mean, everyone still seemed really supportive and really excited to see him there.
What was kind of his theme? We know what he's going to say. Did he seem to key on certain specific things? We already talked about the Carrie Lake thing. He highlighted that. There was the great graphic of her putting her hand over her heart as if she was on The Bachelor when he called her out. But what was some of the themes he really seemed to be emphasizing on? Like you said, he went longer than even he normally does. What do you think he was trying to get across?
It seemed, a lot of people have speculated on this. It seemed to me to be like a campaign speech. Opened up his speech with this video, talking about how dark America is, and one day there's going to be light and America's going to be great again. He hasn't come out and said that he's going to be the 2024 candidate yet, but it seemed a lot like a campaign speech. And and just like any other Trump speech, there's a lot of rambling and talking about the 2020 election and people that weren't loyal to him, talking about Mitch McConnell and talking about how great some of the candidates he endorsed were. And So things like that. It seemed like a very typical Trump speech, but in the beginning, it appeared to be like a campaign.
The room and the mood, and of course, since CPAC happened, and now that we're talking about this, we've had the Mar-a-Lago search warrant stuff. So that's probably changed this calculus a little bit. But the mood in the room and the mood from Trump, was there any doubt in anybody's mind that he's going to run?
Oh, everyone seemed absolutely certain that he's going to run. No one seemed uncertain. Yeah, I think there's a reason why he got 69% on that poll. And in another CPAC straw poll, he got 99% approval rating, which apparently is up 2% from last year's CPAC poll. So yeah, I mean, I think everyone believes that he's running, and I don't think they're wrong.
Who, we talk about Trump and all the other big names. Sure. Who's somebody that maybe we're not all talking about that really seems to distinguish themselves, and that the people at CPAC, that Trumpian base of the GOP, they're really talking about them, and the rest of us maybe haven't been talking about them or are missing on?
Yeah. So one guy I'd say is Mark Robinson. That's someone I didn't really know of. He gave a really good speech. A lot of like militaristic language and stuff like that. Like don't give up, keep fighting. You're a soldier and all that. And but he really knows how to give a good speech. He's really passionate. There were points where he was like just yelling into the mic, and people were roaring like almost on their feet the whole time. I say he's probably one of the most talented speakers that I saw at the whole event. I want to look more into him because I don't really know too much about him.
Yeah, I'm familiar with him. Of course, I'm split my time. I'm based out of North Carolina. He's a lieutenant governor of North Carolina. He was a factory worker. He went viral for going to, I believe it was a county commission meeting, might have been a city council meeting, over the Second Amendment. That speech went viral, and then he ran for office and won. He's probably going to be the next governor of North Carolina. He's getting to be that popular. He's got some problematic things in his past, but he is extremely charismatic. He is great on the mic. That's a very good catch and a very good call out, because he is definitely one of those people folks need to watch out for. Mark Robinson, Lieutenant Governor of the state of North Carolina. Folks can look him up. Good catch on that one. Let's circle back to where you started, though, to put a bow on this. You wrote about it in your piece in USA Today. You talk about the conspiracy theories. You talk about the lies. There seems to be two modes of this. There's either the really enthusiastic folks, and then there's the people that recoil. But there's folks like you and like me, because I used to be like this. I think we need to have healthy conservatism in this country for the country to be healthy. I get sad looking at something like this. I mean, there's parts of it that make me angry, but mostly it's just sad. Like, this is sad to me that people are buying into this. That seemed to be kind of the mood you had. You articulated to me from being in the room. You're walking around, you're seeing people buying the conspiracy theories. What's that sad feeling coming from? Because you're a little younger than me. Just kind of talk through that for a minute.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sad. But like I first started getting into politics in like 2016. Like I'm just a kid, like that's around the age of Trump. And so like I'm familiar with all this, but and I'm not really too familiar with a pre-Trump Republican Party. So like this all seemed very familiar to me. It seemed like, a typical Trumpy event. But there was some other fringe stuff that like, I was a little shocked by or sad about. But yeah, I mean, I'm like a, small government freedom kind of, conservative, and just seeing this stuff about conspiracy theories and like these populist booths, like Americans for National Renewal, and stuff like that. Just seeing like the philosophical change was bothersome to me. Jack Posobiec had a CPAC panel where he talked about the new right, talked about, more focus on, stuff like industrial policy, and the right needs to stop being afraid of big government and all that. And I'd say that bothers me more than the than the sort of crazy flashy things that you see at CPAC. Just the like philosophical undercurrent.
Yeah, I think what bothers me the most is just the fact that nobody has the ability to look at something like like I mentioned before about Googling. I'm being a little facetious, but like you didn't even bother to look up who this guy is. That's the part that bothers me. It's not that because people get sucked into stuff and people like I can understand that how that happens, but it's like you don't even do base level stuff like just checking seeing who a guy is. That kind of stuff bothers me. Chris Schlock, this is great information. Really appreciate your time today. The piece is out USA Today. We're linking to it till we get you back because we're gonna. I found it fascinating you talking about not remembering my first election was 1998, which is the Clinton impeachment election because they impeached him in January '99. So I've always wondered like how much that affects how I view politics was that era. And I'm sure your politics are affected by this era. We'll have to have a chat about that sometime soon. Till we get you back on Heard Tell again, though, let folks know where they can follow you and what you got going on, my friend.
You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Schlak. That's SCHLAK. You can find me at USA Today just by searching my name. And I recently wrote an article for Free the People on tariffs and in China. So you can check that out too.
I'm guessing China is not a popular thing at CPAC.
Not at all.
I figure. Chris Schlock, great work interning at USA Today. He's writing all over the place. Another one of our great Young Voices contributors. We'll definitely have you back, buddy. Great information. Appreciate the time. Thanks for working with us on the schedule. It took us about a week to get this in there, and we'll talk real soon, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All the music on Heard Tell is provided under a Creative Content license from monstercat.com.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.